Bravo's out there alone. We get in there, we recon Bravo, we go home. If everything goes tits up, the Professor is our top priority. Are we clear? Clear as Nar shit. Rodriguez?
Warning.
We've got incoming. Take evasive action.
Serious Sam 3, BFE, short for Before First Encounter, is the third main game in the Serious Sam franchise. A series of games where you play as an ass-kicking protagonist, killing legions of enemies with all manner of awesome weaponry. Sam is a throwback to the FPS protagonists of the 90s like Duke Nukem and Lo Wang, and he's just an enjoyable character to play as. But it pains me to say it, however, that Serious Sam 3 is one of the weakest, if not the weakest game in the series, and I'm genuinely baffled at some of the design choices Crow Team have implemented with this game. I suppose you're probably wondering what they are. Well, let's dive right on in and find out, shall we?
And stay down.
So the story itself takes place before the events of the first game, hence the title, putting you in the shoes of Sam Serious Stone. Again, you're in Egypt, this time trying to figure out how to send Sam back in time to destroy the alien lord Mental, who's brought humanity to the brink of extinction. The thought of an extinct human race doesn't really seem to faze Sam though, who spouts out plenty of double entendres and makes passes on his female comrades.
Come on, Sam. You know I'm more of a minigun girl.
It's a weird mix of this dark and gritty story with the sort of tongue-in-cheek humour that only a character like Sam can pull off, and at the time of the game's release it was a welcome change to all of the modern warfare-inspired shooters that really took themselves too seriously.
I like a powerful woman.
All up, you'll move through 12 different levels, all of which take anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes to complete, with the difficulty ramping up with each new level. Enemies from the prior games all make a return, such as the Beheaded, the Arachnoids, and the Clear, who still prove themselves to be the most annoying motherfuckers in the entire game. New enemies include spiders, grunts armed with shotguns and assault rifles, and scrapjacks, which are a blatant rip-off of the Mancubus from Doom. Lastly, there's the Witch Brides, which float in the air and attack you by locking up your movement controls for a short period of time, like total assholes. Because nothing says artificial difficulty like an enemy that teleports in at random and restricts your movement speed when you're being attacked from all angles. Like all the previous games in the series, Serious Sam 3 is a pretty damn good looking game. The amount of detail with the modelling for enemies is just incredible, and there's a great amount of variety between the enemy types. The levels are long and humongous in size, and often just when you think you're finishing up, you walk into an entirely new area and it just keeps on going. From the various effects during combat through to the textures, it's just a great looking game. Now, I have heard people saying that the engine is well optimized, which I'm not entirely 100% in agreement with. The engine has loads of options to scale things back, but regardless of the setting, I always still seem to get a choppy frame rate. This seems to be one of those games that can go either way, but rest assured it's still more than playable, and when it's all cranked up, it looks amazing. Now, the gameplay is where I started to take issue with Serious Sam 3. Truth be told, it is mostly like its predecessors where it counts most. You find yourself in these large combat arenas, a bunch of enemies spawn in, and you often have to kill all of them before you can proceed. There's nothing wrong with this, and it's something the series has always done well, but there's a few slight modifications to the formula that I just can't abide by. The most glaring fault for me anyway is that the game forces you to reload certain weapons. Now, in the game's defense, the Colt 45s and Coach Gun did require reloading in the older games, but you would kind of expect it for a weapon like the Coach Gun simply to keep it balanced, and also because it's a double-barreled shotgun. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense if you didn't have to reload it. And the Colt 45s were rarely used, so it didn't really make it that much of an issue. The drama with Serious Sam 3 is that you're forced to reload the M29 assault rifle, which is a weapon that essentially replaces the Tommy gun. Now, if you played any of the prior games, you'd know that you'll be using this weapon a fair bit, and to have to frequently reload the damn thing when you got a couple dozen enemies bearing down on you just feels totally out of place. I mean, including reloading in a Serious Sam game is like putting a stamina bar in Super Mario Bros. Imagine if when playing Super Mario Bros. You'd have to stop every 5 seconds to let Mario catch his breath. I don't have any issue with avoiding enemies for the 2 or 3 seconds wait while the weapon reloads, but it just shouldn't be included in the first place. Thankfully, other weapons like the rocket launcher and minigun don't suffer this handicap, but ammo is so rare for these guns for a fair chunk of the campaign, which is fault enough. Oh, and I didn't even mention the inclusion of the iron sights, which improve your aim so slightly that it's more of a hindrance than a benefit. It just seems like it's been put in as this sort of obligatory modern FPS trope. Which would kind of make sense, seeing as the first like 4 or 5 levels take place in Cairo with environments that feel like they've been stripped straight from Call of Duty or Battlefield. Another pretty big screw up is the inclusion of hit-scanning grunt-type enemies armed with shotguns and assault rifles. Now look, Sonny Jim, hit-scanning enemies are fine in interior areas or areas that provide lots of cover. because you can break their line of sight and take them out pretty easily, but when you're in a goddamn desert, circle strafing around a biomechanoid that's firing homing rockets at you, it's just an unfair hindrance to put on the player, as you're always going to take damage from them. Again, it's another new feature that just feels a little bit out of place for the series. I mean, I know the other games had the arachnoids that had miniguns for arms, and yeah, they were hit scanners and pretty annoying, but you encounter these things far less and in fewer numbers, and they didn't throw a couple dozen of them at you at any one time. But I think I'll say hands down the biggest issue with the campaign is the pacing, which is just really, really slow. To say the game has a slow start is an understatement. As I said, all up there's 12 levels, and I'd honestly say that the first 7 or 8 are utterly boring and tedious as all hell. If someone wanted you to watch a movie but told you it's only good for the last 15 minutes, you'd probably tell them to go to hell, so why should it be different with this game? Even by the 8th chapter, you haven't got your hands on all the weapons, but you do at least get the minigun, which makes the combat a little bit more enjoyable, and the areas do start to get more opened up and feel more like the traditional Serious Sam we all know and love. I'm talking about those areas where you're basically just shooting down one large corridor with a weapon like the rocket launcher or the minigun, as droves and droves of enemies like the Clears just keep coming and coming. Now, this is what I think of when I think of Serious Sam, but for this kind of thing to only show up around 8 chapters in is just total horse shit. Not that I consider the later levels to be all that much better. In fact, some of them are so horrendously unbalanced it's laughable, but they are a lot better than the first 2/3 of the game. I get that they're trying to ease the player into going up against all the various enemy types, but it's just integrated far too slowly. It honestly took me about 2 or 3 attempts to get through this game, because every time I'd pick it up, I'd just get so bored from the first few levels and stop playing. Certain levels are so barren on ammunition that it just strips away all the fun from it. I mean, you should never run out of ammo in a Serious Sam game. You should just be constantly moving in some direction with your finger firmly pressed down on the left mouse button. A few of the later stages are also lazy and poorly thrown together by design. There's a part in the campaign where you've got to fire up 2 generators, which boils down to running around this large area collecting Syrian artifacts amongst constantly spawning enemies. At a certain point later in the campaign, they also take all your weapons away from you and force you back to square one, which is just a horrible idea. When you want someone to absolutely positively hate your game, take all their weapons away from them after they've been playing for 7 hours. Great move. When people defend this game by saying, oh well, it's really fun in co-op, my response to that is, yeah, no shit, of course it's fun. In co-op, you don't get penalized when you're killed. You can simply respawn at little cost. Finding a good server for co-op is kinda tough too, and unless you're playing with a friend, don't expect this experience to be all that good. To me, Serious Sam 3 is a serious disappointment. It's unfair, it's frustrating, it's boring, tedious, cheap, slow, and it brought my blood to a boil. The series has had a pretty steady decline with each new game, and with this one I think it's easily the worst of the bunch, and I just hope Crow Team learned from their mistakes with this game when they fix things up for the eventual Serious Sam 4. For now, stick with the first encounter, second encounter, or their HD remasters, because this one, seriously, ain't all that good.
10 sticks of dynamite? $400. Blowing up one of mankind's oldest artworks? Priceless.